Hey listeners, I'm Karen Riley Jeffers, NCSM's Eastern 2 Director. Welcome to our series, Learning with Leaders, Everyone Belongs in Mathematics. Thank you for joining me and my co-host Abel Maestas, the host of Teaching That Counts, as we talk with both leaders and influencers about their math journeys and contributions. Today, we will hear from our special guests about their inspiration, perceptions, and insights regarding instructional decisions that make the mathematics space welcoming and engaging to all. Listen and learn about how beliefs, practices, and policies must continue to advance to ensure that each and every person feels a sense of belonging in mathematics.
All right, welcome everybody to this month's NCSM Learning with Leaders podcast. So, like always, we're very excited for this episode, right? I say that every episode, and I know that I say that also every episode. So, I am your one of the co-hosts, Abel Maestas, and the other co-host is
Karen Riley Jeffers.
Right, and we are so happy to have you here with us listening to this podcast today as we welcome Dr. Sherita Flake to the podcast. So welcome, Dr. Flake.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So Dr. Sherita Flake is a senior professorial lecturer and program director of an MAT program at American University and a nationally recognized scholar in STEM education, equity, and teacher prep. She's a former K-12 instructional leader and a faculty member at St. Johns Hopkins University. Her work centers on cultural identity, belonging, and agency in mathematics and STEM classrooms. Drawing from both her research and lived experiences as a wife and a mother of 3 daughters, Dr. Flake developed an inclusive framework that supports historically marginalized learners and educators. She's the author of the forthcoming book, Creating Inclusive STEM Classrooms, Claiming Place and Making Space in Grades K-5, and co-author of STEM Includes Me. Her teaching, scholarship, and leadership have influenced policy, practice, and professional learning nationally and internationally. Welcome. We are so happy to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
We're very excited. Thank you again for being with us today. Even though Abel just introduced you, if you could take a moment and share some of your journey in education that has led you to your current work.
Thank you so much for that introduction. When I began to think about my journey in education, I began to just think about the lessons that I learned in the kitchen with my grandmother and great-grandmother. You know, those lessons that were centered around measurement and ratios and noticing how that knowledge that I gained from my grandmother and great-grandmother, while I considered it valuable, how it was somehow disconnected from what would be considered formal learning. There was no place for me to talk about how my great-grandmother, Medea, was teaching me those math lessons in my gifted classroom as a teacher. And then when I became a teacher, my first teaching assignment was one of the toughest, it was in one of the toughest neighborhoods in Memphis. In that community, about 17% of the community members had a high school diploma, and my middle school had been historically underperforming for 6 straight years. But when I showed up day one, I recognized that I was teaching gifted students, and I just needed to teach to the assets of their identities to create these thriving communities for them, where them and their families, where they felt connected. I felt a responsibility of creating this shared sense of belonging. So then I began to see the value of my work through my students when they began outperforming the perceived good schools. And now my students who came from communities where people did not have high school diplomas, they have degrees, they are business owners, they are nurses, they have PhDs, and they're contractors. So that, for me, just kind of summarizes my journey in education.
That story reminds me of my educational idol, which was Jaime Escalante. And for those of you that know Jaime Escalante, at least his story from Stand and Deliver, you see the talents of kids that people have given up on.
Right.
Right? They gave up on those kids because they came from the wrong area and they had nothing to give. And he saw their assets. And that's the same thing that you did with your kids. We need so many more believers in our students and in their assets and bringing them into the fold. I just love that story because it just reminds me so much of why I got into education in the first place. Was to do those things for kids in my community that look like me, grew up like me. So, so as you know, our series is titled "Everyone Belongs in Mathematics." Our leading question to all our guests is, what does it mean to belong in mathematics?
Yeah, so I actually love that question, and love thinking about that because in my book, I often talk about how I see belonging in mathematics as a three-part structure through identity, which is who I am is not a barrier. Then belonging, shifting to belonging, which is acknowledging that who I am, so my identity, it has assets that allows my thinking to be valuable, and agency, understanding that I can use the assets for my identities to use math in a way that makes sense to me to create change in the world. I often reflect back to how we always hear in mathematics that math is a secondary language and something that we have to learn. And I think that somehow creates a barrier and excludes people from math because it feels like what you're actually saying is if you don't have the ability to learn a second language, then you won't do well in math. So I began to think about it in terms of what if we thought about creating belonging in math in terms of culturally acquired knowledge that people have and that they already have and that they're already bringing to the classroom. And what if we thought about it in terms of using that as a starting point to make connections? So, for example, I remember when I was a math teacher, I created a math and science night where every teacher was asked to create a booth for hands-on math activities. And the parents, they came, but they didn't want to go home. I can remember at the geometry station, the students were supposed to build a tiny home with their parents. So it was a student-led activity. We had to take the drill away from the parents, but it was so refreshing to see the parents and how the light bulbs went off for them when they began to see how they belonged in math and they could see themselves as valuable in math.
Yeah, I have a kind of a follow-up question. Is that okay?
Of course.
Um, we, many schools struggle with parent engagement and getting parents involved. And I just can you talk a little bit about how it helps the kids so much when the parent can see themselves in mathematics? Like we know how much belonging and agency means for kids
Mhm.
to build on and to become successful mathematicians in their own mind. But what does it mean and do to them when they see their parents not only fall in love with mathematics, but at least believe that they're mathematicians too?
Absolutely. That connects back to that culturally acquired knowledge because if parents can see themselves as mathematicians, that drives the language that is taking place, that is happening in the home. And so that adds value to the culturally acquired knowledge that the student is able to bring to the school. So when we had the students who were able to engage in the math and science night with their parents, that actually started before math and science night. That started with a parent homework board that I had in my classroom, because what I wanted to do was put some of the language of math in the home with the students. And so the students, each week, they had to teach a math concept to their parents, and their parents would complete the math homework. Now, I told the parents on the front end, you automatically get a 100 for participation. But the parents, they didn't want to just say, oh, I'm just participatory in this. They wanted to learn and they wanted to do. And that invited the parents into the school because they wanted to come see their work with a 100 in math hung up inside the school on my bulletin board. So when I began to create that culture, then when the math and science night came, they knew that they belonged, but they didn't really know how much they belonged. Building that tiny house, you guys, like that was, I wish I had recorded it, but that was something to see. Like there was a line for the trio.
That's amazing. You made me think of so many different things. When we shifted to Common Core standards and, we have this quote unquote new math, it just made me think about like how powerful would it have been if more of us had taken the same lens and just like, as we're teaching the students, like share this, not just tell your parents what you learned today, but actually giving them an assignment that they can engage in with their parents. And for their parents to have to do something because that would have built their content knowledge of this quote unquote new math, and then also help them to see that it's not really that new. It's just, digging more into the conceptual side of things. When you're talking about like the culturally acquired knowledge, for some reason, it made me think about like geometric patterns and braiding and like the mosaics and those types of things and the art that's integrated into mathematics. You grow up getting your hair braided all the time, but you don't think about the fact that, it's a pattern and it's geometry and those types of things. And just thinking about like, how do we bring more of that into the classroom too? I remember like weaving mats with my students when we were learning about different things or like around the holidays. So thank you for sharing that aspect. So we've heard from you what it means to belong in mathematics, but what does it mean to belong in STEM, especially as we still see lower representation of certain groups in STEM fields?
Yes, and when we think about STEM, especially when I think about STEM, my research has, shown me that STEM has always been considered an exclusive field, where there is this illusion of hierarchy that privileges those with access to a certain type of STEM knowledge. For example, like proper language and ways of demonstrating that understanding. And what STEM also does is a pretty good job of excluding those who don't have access to those perceived elite experiences. Let's take into consideration how access to Algebra 1 and physical science in middle school, how that is the gateway to this illusion of hierarchy. When my middle daughter, when she was in middle school, we were told that she did not have what it takes to be in those advanced classes. The rationale that they gave us, it included language around that was consistent with her having ADD. So what did we do? We homeschooled her because I didn't believe that. I knew that she had the abilities to excel in those classes. And not only did she excel in undergrad with a bachelor's degree in physics, but now she is the first Black PhD physics student at her university. And she is in her 4th year of the program. She is thriving and doing well. And when I share this success story, people sometimes like they automatically ask me a microaggression. They say things like, "Oh, so she's in applied physics?" And I'm just like, "No, she's in a theoretical physics program." And I'm just wondering, like, why is it so hard for you to imagine that she could be in this theoretical physics program?
Mm.
I mean, I could say the quiet part out loud because I feel it as a Latino. We're getting, I'm gonna say, picked on right now as it is, and so I can see that there's still this cloud of judgment, of like hidden judgment, that we don't belong in the space that people think we belong. So yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was a problem for me until I felt it. Similar to that, I won an award my senior year of college for outstanding contributions to the university, and my parents got to sit in the front row of commencement. And I was the only Latino that got a senior award in this school that was it was a very um, not a very diverse university. And my parents and my uncle, my uncle and aunt were there to see me graduate, and the security came to them and said, "Are you? These seats are reserved for award winners." They didn't say anything to anybody else, just mine, because I guess the brown kid isn't supposed to win an award, right? So I was just I was shocked, and they had to like pull out the commencement and like show them an ID that they were my parents. Like, it was ridiculous. So there's just these little microaggressions, and that I think they affect us a little bit too, of our own belonging in in fields that I think that we should be in, right? We should be in STEM, science, technology, and especially engineering. Can you elaborate a little bit on not only marginalized groups but females? I know that there's still a as a teacher, my female it's funny, in high school, my female students are like my top students, and all the data show that like female students do outperform male students in high school. But then all of a sudden we get to university and we get to careers and stuff, and they're not represented in STEM fields. So what can we be doing to encourage
Mhm.
especially our female students, to our girls, to get to STEM fields, and think about being an engineer and a scientist, and doing technology and AI and all those fields that we know that they're so great at. I had one student, real quickly. I had one student. She was my student. She's like, "What should I do? Should I go into this?" And I'm like, "I think statistics would be great for you. Like, there's something about you that screams stats major to me." And she was like, "I never even thought of that." I said, "I think so." And so then when she graduated, she went to UCLA, she graduated, and she said, statistics was the right call. I love it. She's like a data
Mhm.
scientist for a firm down in LA, and it's just amazing. And I think that we just, like, personally, I think we need more role models to do that. But I'm wondering, in your work, what can we be doing to encourage them to get into the fields?
So, you stole my word,
Oh, I'm sorry.
role models, because that is like the next path, which is like mentors, creating mentors. I've done research in mentors, on like mentoring programs. I've also done research around this word that I've termed as proto narratives, because we often hear like tell the counter, narrative, counter story, but this is the experience. This is the narrative. This is what has happened. And in that work, it is essential to have mentors in the field, to create that thriving community, because a thriving community is essential for our women to recognize that the assets of their identities are valuable to create this agency, to create change. It all goes back to the identity, belonging, and agency that I talk about. But when we have mentors, and I think about my daughter as she began to go to college, there were group chats when she was, because it may have been two women who were majoring in physics in her undergrad program. And there were group chats that were created with male students that excluded the women. And in the group chat, they were sharing answers, sharing copies of the book. She was just excluded. So she really had to make it on her own. And when she went to graduate school to get her PhD in physics, she was able to find a mentor, a faculty mentor at her university. Now, her faculty mentor has an engineering background, but is close enough to physics to be able to mentor her through this place. And without giving away too many identifiable characteristics, right? From that, she was advised to go to like this conference, go to that conference. And that is where she began to make connections about how to really operate and exist in the world of physics. And now she's, being able to go and connect with other places to probably have like a postdoc. So the mentoring, like I just want to take it back to the mentoring place, that mentoring has the potential to create the thriving community. And I just want to just kind of name something about the mentoring space. We should not assume that, hey, you're a physics major, she's a physics major, let's make a connection that will be your mentor. We have to be strategic and purposeful about how the mentors are assigned. And when I began to shift and think about assigning mentors based on identity alignment, that's when I began to see mentor pairing really matter and really make a significant impact for the women in STEM.
Can you say more about the identity alignment and like be really explicitly clear? Because I'm thinking about like different fellowships and other type of mentoring programs, and I'm just curious about like how do you make that alignment?
Yeah. So I have a mentor survey that I shared. So this started back in with educator preparation. Okay, when we would assign our students to a mentor at their school, and we began to see like all sorts of misaligned mentor matching, with mentor pairing, mentor matching. And when I looked at it, people were assigned a mentor because you're a third grade math teacher, so I'm going to put you with another third grade math teacher. Or you are teaching science, so I'm going to put you with another science teacher. And they didn't have anything in common. So on my mentor demographic survey, I have aligned that with the 4 dimensions of cultural identity, which I've done a lot of research around. And I found that each person has 4 dimensions of their cultural identity. And people began to name the dimensions, those identities. And then they began to self-identify which of these identities is a priority for them in their teaching space. Which identity do they believe will actually grow their teaching practice? Likewise, we ask the mentors, which identity do you believe is most significant for you as a mentor? And which identity do you believe is most significant for you to contribute to the learning space? Because it all goes back to creating the thriving communities. And so when we paired them with the right people who had the similarly named identities, they thrived in those communities. They felt safe, They felt seen. They felt heard. They felt vulnerable. They felt more inclined to take risks as it relates to educator preparation. And then when I see the same thing happening, like I look back at my daughter, she didn't thrive until she was with the right person that had a similar experience with her. And they both named the same like identity that was their top prioritized identity. And so when we begin to think about mentor pairing, we have to be a little bit more strategic about how we actually pair people with their mentor.
Thank you for that. That's the specifics. I'm just getting, I mean, gosh, I'm just thinking of so much. Like I'm thinking about the mentor, like, yeah, I'm thinking about how my district puts mentors together, the mentorship programs, and just like the thought that goes into connecting people that have connections culturally so powerful, not just do they teach third grade like that. That's just, mic drop, I think, right there.
Thank you.
But it's really embracing the person. And I think what's coming to me right now is like, do you see me? And the answer is, I see you. And so like through the dimensions of cultural identity, it's like you're seeing the mentors and you're seeing the mentees, or at least gauging like a part of their essence and trying to connect them based on that, with the overarching, goal of what they're trying to accomplish. But it's so right that, I mean, there's so many people who work in your field, but not everybody is a mentor, and it's not everybody that you connect with. It's not everybody who acts in a way that you can trust, and so that's really powerful, really, really
Thank you.
powerful.
Thank you.
So I'm going to shift back to a question that I had on STEM specifically. I know that at least my wife is an elementary school teacher, and there's such an emphasis on ELA and math. And it really, I think that emphasis has to do with state testing. Like I think we overtest kids, but there's just like you know, we need to have them all at this level, at this level, right? And so school districts and schools are being judged by those scores, and then that kind of trickles down into a place where I've heard elementary teachers like they give up science lessons and social science lessons and tech and engineering, those parts of STEM. Some schools even give up STEAM, like arts are not being taught because students have to do this well in ELA and this well in math. There's so much pressure. So how can teachers and districts effectively integrate STEM into their day-to-day curriculums, lessons and stuff, so then that way they still get their ELA and math, but they really have the opportunity to do the other pieces, which I believe are just so much more powerful and spark curiosity than, no offense, ELA out there, but some of the writings just don't spark curiosity.
Yes, I agree. Just, I may be a little biased towards them. But, one of the things that I do mention in my book is how we can use, so there's this, so claims, evidence, reasoning. We talk about that in science a lot, and how that really aligns with writing and literacy in ELA. So one of the strategies that I talk about is like how we can connect that to community, because, I still take it all back to creating these thriving communities, but how we can, so when I introduce that model for claim, evidence, and reasoning, I introduce it from the standpoint that we can use it to make bridges to build literacy, and how that literacy can be useful in helping to solve word problems in math classes, how it can be used to unpack inquiry in science, and how it is not like an add-on, but how we also just need to sharpen that part of the brain for our students because they can use that same type of inquiry process as they are annotating the readings that they have to read in literacy. They can use the same type of processing as they are unpacking math word problems. But that part of the brain, it's so essential that we actually nurture it. I think about my 4-year-old grandson, how he is being cultivated from a very early age to engage in inquiry, and how he's connecting that to noticing patterns for reading and those beginning reader skills. So it's all interconnected together. And if we, are able to introduce and also just, allow them to be engaged with with the science experiments from a very early age, that does nothing but sharpen their brains as they are engaging with those literacy passages in the math word problems, which we know they present challenges for our students at times.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was engaging in a conversation. It's a fight that we have in our district, and the way we're organized, like elementary math, science, and social studies are part of a core group. And we have one supervisor. And one thing that my supervisor is insistent on, and she's like, we are a team. And when we are in schools and we hear people talking about, oh, we're going to cut social studies and science and so forth so that we can do more ELA and math, she's like, nope, we're not supporting that. You might be mathematics, you might be literacy, but they are just as important. And I was talking to my social studies counterparts, and they were sharing how one of the positives, because a lot of times, because we're so test driven, like everything's so test driven. So I'm just like, what's the incentive? So we were just having that conversation. And similarly to what you were saying in terms of when our students are sitting down for these assessments that we're so driven by, a lot of what they see is rooted in science and civics. And so the more access that they have to performing those things, being a part of those experiments, integrating like the mathematics and so forth, then it's not just knowing how to read or getting through the novels. It's also being able to have that, because we all know when you sit down to read something scientific, it's not as you can't get through it as quickly sometimes as some of the other things. Like it's a different type of reading. And so just having that exposure makes the integration like so much more beneficial and purposeful. That's going to benefit them and, support them in being like well-rounded individuals in the long run.
So can I just add one thing though? Because when you think about it, there's a piece of math that says like, is this solution reasonable? Is this reasonable? And what science does through the scientific process is it helps the student to go through a process of saying like, is this reasonable? I have a process for approaching this problem to see, did my answer make sense? So yeah.
Science helps us answer those questions, right?
Fair enough.
Thank you so much for being here. We're coming to the end of the podcast. And Karen and I say this every time. We learn so much by doing this podcast. And we, again, learned so much from you today. My mind's blown about the mentorship stuff. I tell you, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that with me, definitely. As we wrap up, we often ask our guests to give one tip that leaders can do to support a sense of belonging in mathematics and STEM that is connected to your work.
Yeah, so one powerful move that I believe leaders can do is to embrace a justice-centered mindset, which is centered around inclusive teaching mindsets, which is a growth model. Like, how do we support teachers with growing and helping to just kind of examine how everyday decisions that teachers make, like grouping, pacing, participation, like how those either reinforce or disrupt exclusion in mathematics. And just remembering that belonging doesn't happen by accident, it's intentional and it's cultivated when we as leaders intentionally align our beliefs with practices that honor identity and agency in mathematics.
Align ourselves with practices that honor agency and identity in mathematics. I absolutely love that. Just the intentionality around how we can't make ourselves belong, and that, like, we as individuals have to, like you said, align ourselves with those actions that are going to support others in feeling like they belong. So thank you again for joining us today. It was an amazing conversation. I got so much out of it. But before we leave, how can our listeners learn a little bit more about you and your work?
Yes, so you are welcome to to visit my website. It is www.sheritaflake.com, and there you'll see my book, Inclusive STEM Classrooms, which is set to be published February 24th. So you can follow me there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Sherita, for joining us this month on our podcast. Again, we've learned so much and just a wonderful, enjoyable conversation. So thank you, listeners, for listening in, tuning in again. And just want to let everyone know that we will be switching it up. So this is going to be March. So I'd like our listeners to think about a new series. So what are some topics, some ideas for a series? We're going to let our listeners give us some ideas for what we should do for our next series, which won't start until, I believe, October, November. Is that right, Karen? Yeah, so we have some time, but I wanted to get everybody thinking about that now as we move away from our series on belonging to something new. So we'd love to hear from our listeners, and you can reach out at NCSM and let us know. So thank you once again to our guest, Dr. Sherita Flake, and thank you to all our listeners for listening this month.
We hope that you have been inspired by this bold mathematics leadership conversation, and will tune in to our podcast series each month. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. You can learn more about NCSM leadership and mathematics education and our upcoming professional learning events on the NCSM website, mathedleadership.com. You can also follow NCSM on the X at mathedleaders and using the hashtag NCSMBold. Until next time.